a very beautiful reading from Matthew. That is so beautiful. You know, usually because we have this every Sunday, Jesus just brought tears to these eyes. We read a reading from the Bible and a reading from the Gita that in essence is saying the same thing, but the feeling in the Bible is so different than the feeling in the Gita. And of course, we've spoken many, many times. We always talk about why that's true. We talk about yugas. We talk about how Jesus had to use a different language 2,300 years ago, really in the deepest part of Kali Yuga. The Yuga, those thousands of years where delusion is the greatest and people are blinded and there's no subtlety or sensitivity in their vibrational selves, their spirit, their soul. So you can't speak to them in that language. You have to speak to them in a tougher, more down-to-earth kind of way, and Jesus did. And he used, as we know, parables all the time because he was speaking to masses, but he would often say, for those who have ears to hear. So if you could understand his parables or his language, you became one who could absorb, know, realize the beautiful teachings that he brought. But there were few. I mean, it was Jesus Christ, and he had 12 disciples who were following him. He, of course, had more followers, but 12. And we know they didn't even do such a great job, all of them. One of them betrayed him. I mean, it's complicated. This spiritual path is very, very hard. So who's ever asking that question, please know that you're not alone. God did not make this easy on us. Evelyn alluded to that when she said a cousin or a friend said, why didn't God just help us be born remembering everything? And it's a complicated question and probably not a good question because, as Buddha said, the mind that asked that question could never understand the answer. Meaning, we cannot ever know the answer to that question until we are with God. Then we have all the answers to all the questions we ever had. But guess what? We don't care anymore. We realize how silly they were. Just the mind doing its thing. I'm not saying to you that your question was silly. I mean, none of these questions are silly, but we're all silly in a way. So what I was saying when I was talking about the difference between the Bible and the Gita is that I always find Krishna is so reassuring. Every passage that we read on Sundays, Krishna is sort of saying, don't worry about anything. I'm right here. I'm going to hold you. And in the end, no matter what happens, if you fail and fail and fail, just bring me your failures. He's saying, in essence, what Jesus is saying so sweetly in this passage, which I find a little more unusual for Jesus, but he's saying, bring me your failures. He's saying, you don't have to struggle out there alone. When it gets too hard for you, okay, Lakshmi's coming, it means there must be a problem, something. I didn't mean that the way it sounds. She comes often when there's no problem, but when it has to do with sound and me speaking here. But Jesus is saying, don't feel like you're alone. You're never alone. Even if you're burdened with that yoke that you have to carry, which is part of me, he's saying. It's part of the divine. It's the answer I just was giving to Evelyn. Nothing exists that is separate from God. It's impossible. everything, every thought, every physical thing, every feeling has been made manifest from that place of super consciousness, from that which is behind, not just what has been manifested, but behind every thought, that which exists beyond any of it, behind any of it. We call it the causal plane, but it doesn't matter what we call it. Everything came from there. So whether it's the love of your life or an abusive partner, whether it's a perfect child or the most troubled child in the world, whether it's a beautiful mansion or a house that's being swept away by a flood, we could go on and on. It's all part of God. And we suffer. We're human. We're human. The nature of the human condition is that we're not yet perfect in our realization. So we will suffer. It's hard, and it doesn't serve us to keep contemplating, why did it have to be hard? Why did it have to be hard? It serves us to be, as Swamiji said, solution-oriented. What do I do? How do I hold that which is challenging? What do I do with that energy? Because it's all pure energy. And Jesus is saying, just come and be with me. You can even bring me all of that trouble, which is right now unbearable for you. And you, I forget all of the words now, but lay down with me, even with the yoke, even with that heavy burden. And the question of how do I do that, the answer, I should say, really is, it's very simple. But as with so many things in life, so many things that are ultimately simple, but they're not easy. It's not easy getting there. So I want to say to you, go to your altar and remember that, hold on for just 1 minute, that's annoying me. Okay, that which annoyed her 10 minutes ago finally got to me. You know, I had an experience once that I know many of you have heard, but it was an extraordinary, as in extraordinary, so always worth sharing again. When I was up at the meditation retreat and had gone into Babaji's cave that's been recreated up at the retreat to meditate. And I had an experience of feeling the masters coming in behind me. And I just asked for Kleenex, excuse me for 1 moment. And I didn't hear them, but what they delivered to me in a way that's very hard to put into words, but I'll bet all of you know it. You just suddenly know something and you know it didn't come from your thoughts. They said, we are about to ask a lot of you, which really, honestly, nearly stopped my heart because I was already really doing a lot in the world. And I thought, now you're telling me you're about to ask a lot of me? They said, but if you get confused and forget who's doing it, who's actually doing it, find the nearest altar and we will remind you. In other words, it's God acting through you. It was an extraordinary extraordinary experience, an amazing and perfect, really, appearance of the divine in my life. And it took me 2 years because I came back from that, whatever I was doing there, seclusion retreat, I don't know. And a lot unfolded, all here, all at Ananda. But they were right, it was a lot. And many times I would find myself seeking an altar. And about 2 years later, I just burst out laughing when I realized that where is the nearest altar, which is what they said to me, find the nearest altar. And I realized they're talking about my heart chakra. Find us there and you will know the truth. And they've never failed me when I remember to okay, take two. When I remember to pray, to go deep, to take that question or that concern or that fear or that heaviness, that yoke into my heart, into a meditation. Honestly, it does help for us mere mortals to find a beautiful altar. That's part of why we all need to have an altar at home. We have many altars here. Find an altar. And of course, there are times where you can't do that. Find the nearest altar, and we will remind you. And what it means is they come. They remind us we're right here. We've never gone anywhere. You went, you left, you thought you had to do that. You actually believed for 2 years that you needed to be a full-time caregiver, a full-time spiritual director, a part-time physician. You thought you were doing it all. Of course you're exhausted. Of course it weighs you down. You can't do that, but I can, God says. I can do anything. So Jesus is telling us, use me, remember me, come to me, think of me, pray to me. And just as Krishna says in the end of that, and if in this thy faint heart fails, he says, so beautiful, bring me your failures. So the hard part is giving it up, is letting it go for a while. Because as hard as this is for us to know or believe, part of the human condition is the way that we're drawn to pain and to suffering. We just are. It's a part of us. I used to say to patients very often, do you want to be well? Of course I do. They would say, why would I be here otherwise? I said, if you want to be well, I think I can help you. But I will tell you, in many instances, when they started feeling well, it scared them. It scared them. And I understand. I have been there myself. And they would, in a very clear to me way, start holding on to their illness again. Because there's a lot of safety when we're less than all of who we can be. We get to be taken care of. We get to be little. We get to have our feelings hurt. We get to try and justify that. That's all ego. And the ego is back there saying, yeah, look, I got them again. But It is part of the human condition. So it's very, very challenging to genuinely lay down the yoke. But it's a goal, and the whole spiritual path is directional. We're just on it. We just keep that light right here as often as we can, and we practice, literally practice laying down. Open your heart. Offer it to God. God, I don't want this. It's too much for me. Honestly, I feel that. I can't do this. Please take it. You take it. You created it to begin with. It was never really mine. And it's a practice, just like I was saying about seeing God in everything and everyone. And will we get it perfect in this life? Well, Master says we've already lived 10 million lives. Maybe this is it for some of you. Or maybe there's 10 million and one at least. I don't know. But I do know this. When we leave this body at the end of this life, every bit of spiritual progress that we've made, Master's told us this, his words, not mine, we keep. Nothing happens to it. And when we're born again, we actually do come back. Oh, we have to live through stuff. Master himself said taking on a human body was like putting ourselves in a heavy winter coat on a hot day. It feels confining, it feels terrible. And we live with delusion again, but we are wiser. And we might find our way onto our spiritual paths sooner in that life. We might be able to stay longer, whatever. We don't lose this. We'll never lose it. So I love that you found that reading from Jesus, and I can imagine that it came to you in some moment of great suffering, and it doesn't make sense to our heads. It's not rational. Jesus and other avatars are not speaking to our minds. They're not speaking to our rational selves. They don't see us that way. They see us as beings of pure light and pure love. So he was speaking to your heart, to your soul nature. Read that reading from Matthew over and over. I would say read it every day. And as you read it, keep your heart open. Don't let it get caught in that mind that wants to keep saying, but what does that mean? What does this mean? The answer is not in the rational meaning. The answer is in that offer of such pure love. I will take your burden. I will carry you. And can you read me the beginning of that reading again?
Of the quote?
From Matthew.
Yes. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest.
And this is what he's saying. And the rest, it's not taking a nap. It's not even if you physically lie down to try, because if you lay down on your back, it does open your heart. And it allows energy to flow more easily there. The rest that he's talking about is, I will give you an experience of the love of God, and you will not be weary. You may not be able to hold it, but I will show you that. This is what it feels like to offer yourself into the divine, to forget your human experience. And this is why we meditate, because for anybody who's been meditating for a long time, or sometimes people haven't experienced their first time, it's really not about time. When we go deep in meditation, let me put it that way. We experience that. We forget. We forget the body. This is why sometimes when we're meditating, the body's going like this. Not that we're falling asleep necessarily, though sometimes we do, but we forget the body. Master said, I forget which body I'm supposed to hold up. And Swamiji, you remember, he said he used to have to help him out of 29 palms because he would forget which body he was in, so the body would just drop. That's the rest. And when it happens, it's so refreshing. It gives you energy to keep going. When we leave our bodies, if we enter a state of samadhi, that final exit, we don't keep coming back. But most of us will have a taste of that, and then we'll be back. But it really allows us to keep moving where we're headed, which is towards that noble taper of inner communion, towards living in that state of rest. So thank you for sharing that quote, that saying. It's very beautiful. Thank you.